work and labor that he has done. So let's give him a hand. Let him know we appreciate him.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Hey, I just want to say I will take up less time than both of those guys. They're smarter than me. They probably got a lot more to say. I was wondering as I was listed on the flyer with two outstanding men of God, why am I on this flyer? But I'm thankful to be here, and I'm appreciative of Pastor Ryan to let us to be a part of this amazing event. And I found out, thank you. I found out that when you go out of your way to make kids feel special, parents will recognize that. And then that will make them want to be a part of it. So what I was doing for Isla was just really what I do every day. Kids need to feel loved. And if they feel loved, then they want to be a part of something. And that's really the root of what we're doing. And I'm sandwiched in between discipleship and Christ-centered decision-making, and that's what youth ministry is. Yeah. You disciple young people and then help them make Christ-centered decisions. And so we have to do that as leaders, and if we can do that as leaders, then we can teach our children to do that. I've been the youth pastor at the Tabernacle Church in Jellicoe for 9 years. I inherited a group that needed rebuilding, a group that was in turmoil. There were some things that happened in a church, and everybody goes through them. And so I didn't really want to do it until the Lord spoke to me through a sermon and really just made me realize this is where I want you, this is where I need you to be. And so I accepted that role. When I took over, there were 8 core kids in that group. They would have friends come, so there would be 14 at times, but always 8 that were steady. And in 2 years, 5 of those would graduate from high school. And so that would leave us with 3 core kids in the group. So we had to make a decision at that point, what are we going to do to help grow this thing? And so our focus then turned to, and I know my topic is youth ministry, but I feel like youth ministry and kids ministry, in the words of Michael Scott, will convalesce together. Okay? And so when I'm talking to you about practical tips today to make this thing work, that's what we're talking about. Kids ministry and the teenagers. Youth is defined as really 13 to 18, or depending on who you're looking at, 12 to 19, whichever study you're looking at. But really, all God's children are important, and if we can catch them young. So when we took over that program, we had 8, and they would graduate. So we were trying to make decisions. Then COVID happened as we're rebuilding. From the ages of 4 to 18, we would probably have 30 in a midweek service. And so that's not really where you want to be. If you're trying to be the church of Jellicoe or the church of your town, that's 30's not really the number that you want to be at. You really want that number to be higher. And, I felt like, especially early, my worth as a youth pastor was the numbers that we had. And that's not really it. It's not all about numbers, but it is about growth. It's about healthy growth, right? So you want to grow sustainably, but you want to grow spiritually while you're growing in number, physically. And so when COVID happened, we had to make a decision. So what we would do is, for special events, we weren't able to do it every week or what have you, but we would make short little videos and we would send them out and text them to parents, or we would post them on Facebook, or for holidays we would do something special for the kids, and I read the Easter story and we'd send that out, and we'd do just little things to kind of keep them involved. And so, but the game plan for churches, not just youth ministry, for ministry as a whole during COVID changed, and so it really caused us all to hit the reset button on your old Nintendo system. I'm tired of losing, so you'd hit that reset button. Somebody was winning, you'd hit that reset button real quick and be like, oh, my bad. Well, we were forced to hit that reset button. And so we developed a new game plan. When we decided to go back to in-person service, we had the made kids were the part of our youth group. The kids that had to be there. Their parents were part of the ministry team, or or our volunteer group or whatever. So we would have 10 to 15 kids that were made to be there on a midweek service, and that's what we're trying to build. And so we decided that that's the core group we're going to build around at all ages. And so that's developed into, for the last month, we have averaged 64 kids. For 4 straight weeks, it's been over 60, and so we're growing still, but we're kind of in a phase where we're stagnant a little bit, and we're trying to rebrand and expand. But of course, we shut down, and I'll get to this a little bit later. We shut down during after school, and so the month of June and the first 2 weeks of July, we shut down. It's important to give your people a break. Right, and we've got a lot of people on vacations, and you know, we go to camp, and we take a lot of time to just recharge, and that's important. I'll get to that in just a little bit. But what works for you in youth ministry? There's no pattern. You know, you can listen to conference speak, and you can do all kinds of things, and a lot of things are going to sound good. I used to go to a lot of coaching clinics, and they would have all these. They would run these drills, and they would be so smooth, and they would look good, but you got 15 coaches. You know, you got 12 players, and everybody's moving at a high speed, but it looks good because there's so many parts working. Well, that's not always practical, because you're not going to have 15 coaches. You're not going to have 15 volunteers in your youth department. You're not going to have all of the things that a conference speaker will come in and say, this is what you do, and this is how you make it work. If you want to grow from 0 to 150 in 6 weeks, this is how you do it. That's not going to work. So you've got to take what's good, right, and develop that and make it yours. So when I give you these practical tips, I understand that what we've done is not always going to work where you're at. But if you can take a little bit of what we've done to make it work for you, then thank God, right? But it has to be yours. I could shut down right now when I say this. The first thing you have to do is pray. All men can come up with a good idea, but if it's not of God, you're wasting your time, right? I can be done. The second thing you have to do, though, is you have to be led by the Spirit. So you pray and you're led by the Spirit. And those two things, if you do those two things, you'll build your youth ministry. You'll not only build it physically, you'll see numbers go up, but you'll grow it healthy, right? It'll be a spiritual growth. It'll be a sustainable growth. And then what's going to happen is you've made disciples, and then they're going to build your youth group. There's very little you can do as a pastor. I sent a text message to Pastor Carl when we were at senior retreat, and the numbers of people who are invited to church. And I think this works at every level, because I've been at football games, I've been at basketball games, I go to a lot of events where kids are, and I will invite kids to church, but they never show up because I invite them. Right. They show up because their peers invite them. Right? And so we have to make disciples who want to build the program and make it better. Now I'll get to what I've put on there. I use the word symposium just because I heard Vic Schaefer use it one time, and it's just a fancy word for conference is all it is. But I put that on there to be funny, not necessarily for you, but for me. It was for me. Sometimes I have to do things, and so if I find enjoyment out of it. And I wanted to share that one. There's two types of youth pastors. There are those that are humble and those that are about to be humbled, right? And so when I took over as the youth pastor, I was proud. You know, it's something that I wanted to do. And then as kids started to depart from the youth group, I was humbled very quickly. And I learned fast that this thing ain't about me, right? And sometimes in a leadership role, and you take that, if you're building something, it's easy to feel like it's about you. But it's never about you, okay? And if you're not humble yet, you're going to be very soon. Or when you step into it, you're going to figure out, I've stepped into something that's a lot bigger than me. The importance of youth ministry is really the first topic that I want to talk about, and it's really because of what, as the Jamaicans would say, Dr. Mike talked about to begin with. It's about discipleship, and the importance of our youth ministry is the future of our churches. It's the future of our organization. If we don't invest in our youth ministries, then we'll never have an organization or a church in the future. So it depends on what kind of investment that you want to make. You know, as older folks, the investment that we can make sometimes is just to be there. On the way back from senior retreat, Sister Janie was a young woman when she went to be a missionary and live on the mission field in Haiti. And on the way back, I just asked her some questions. I'm like, Janie, what about this generation gives you hope for the future? And she said that it blew my mind how simple this is. She said it's really that they don't care to just be a part of our church service. And so we've got a pretty solid group of teenagers in grades 9 through 12 that sit in the front, middle, front row, and then we've got a pretty solid group of middle schoolers or junior high, depending on I don't know what you call it up here. It's middle school at home. But 6th, 7th, 8th graders that sit on the front row on the side. And so those kids are encouraging our older people. And so she said it's because they want to be a part of the service. But what I have found out is that teenagers and junior hires, those that are preteens, are looking for something to fill a void. And they're not necessarily sure what they're looking for, but when they find it, they know it. And so they found it at our church, and they're now wanting to be as close to where that is as possible. You see it a lot when we go to youth camp. You see it, they just flood to the altar. Now, some of that is because it's common up there. That's what they've always done. But some of it is young people truly wanting to be into the presence of God, and they want to be as close to the action as they can get to it. I remember one kid from camp this year, and I took him up there. He was from my youth group, and so I felt the Lord impressing me to go pray for this kid. So he's standing in front of the stage, and he's standing. Look, there's 3 feet on either side of him with people, and I felt the Lord impressing me to go pray for that young man. And I'm like, I'm not praying for him. I know his situation. I know everything that's happened in his life, and I don't want to speak to him from that perspective because it's me knowing his situation. So I walked to the other side of the stage. Right? And in doing that, the Lord pulled me back. I mean, sometimes you just can't get away from it. And I didn't really say anything to the young man. I put my hands on the side of his face, and I've never seen a kid that tough break down that much. And it's because he wanted to be in the presence. Right? And so if we make that accessible to them, that's the importance. Our future depends on it. Now, that young man has a calling on his life, and I feel like I know what it is, but I don't call it out because it's not my job to call people. I want him to know for sure, but it's my job to nurture that and encourage that, so lead him in the direction of finding out. But what would happen if I hadn't done that? Right? What would happen if we hadn't just been there for him and loved him? Now, the future of our organization and the future of our church is going to depend on what that young man decides to do. There's another instance. There was a young lady in a dorm room, and I just talked to her, and I was like, listen, there was a few years ago, you knew what your purpose was. You knew what your calling was. But for some reason, you've allowed people or the enemy or what have you to pull you away from that and discourage you and distract you. So why now are you, didn't even want to be at camp, right? Just didn't want to be there. But she broke down because I called out exactly what was going on in her life. And then stepped into it in that week. And so if we make that important, then that's the importance. That's the future. So now she's ready to step into a calling because of an encouragement. And so the importance is that we're there for them. The importance, youth ministry can't just be another program in our churches. It has to be something that we invest in. We invest seeds of faith, we invest seeds of hope, and we invest seeds of love. And when we do that, what we'll see is the benefits, and we'll bear the fruit for generations. So that if we don't have something coming behind, and if you think about it, Moses was the one that God said, listen, I want you to go to Pharaoh, and I want you to tell him to let my people go. Right? And God used Moses to do that. But when they got into the wilderness, Moses wasn't the one to take them to the next level. Moses had Joshua coming up behind him. So if we don't have those coming up behind us, somebody to take our place, then when we die in the wilderness, who's going to take them to the promised land? If we don't have somebody ready to take over, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a teenager, but you have to have somebody that's prepared, and then they have to prepare somebody. I think one of the downfalls of Israel is that Joshua didn't have somebody to turn to. He made the mistake of not having somebody follow him to lead the people. I make this joke, what follows Joshua? Judges. It's true. But if you don't have somebody to come behind, then where do we turn? We start looking other places to find a leader, right? We start looking for other places to find something that's going on. How many of you can remember your youth ministry, like when you were that age? How many of you can remember, and how many of you were shaped by that, and how many of you were molded by that? That's the importance of youth ministry, is that it shapes lives and it builds character. So just like those examples that I was talking about, those lives are shaped. And there are people in this room whose lives have been shaped by youth ministry. And it's important. Proverbs 22:6 says that if you train up a child in the way that he should go, then when he's old, he'll never depart from it. Donnie Hill said this about this, that it's not a guarantee that if you raise your kids up in church that they'll always live right and that they'll always stay in the church and that they'll always serve. But the guarantee is that they'll know what the truth is, right? And so it still shapes your life. Even if you're not living it, your life is still shaped by what you learned in your youth or kids ministry. So you carry those principles with you even into adulthood. And you can go back and remember that. There was a time when I was super active in a youth group, and I wanted to be that, and I was a student leader, and you know, I would get up, I'd lead devotion, and you know, I would lead prayer, and then there was a time when I stepped away from it because the weight of what God was calling me into scared me, and I stepped away from it, right? But every time that I was in the world, living my way, doing my thing, I would remember right. I would remember truth. And so the person that I was shaped by that youth ministry. It also molded my character. There are things that I knew right from wrong, and there are things that I would do even in sin. I can remember one time we were getting ready to go out, and we were going, forgive me. We had a group of people that were going, and we were going to the club. I mean, we were just going to go hang out. Probably do stuff that wasn't good for us, right? I pulled into the gas station to get gas, and there was a man sitting outside. It was cold. And, you know, if you've ever been mountain cold, it's cold. I know it's cold up here, but it's cold in them mountains too. And so there was a man sitting outside. He had an army green duffel bag. You remember, Pastor Dennis, like the big long one, it's the rucksack they call it. He had that, and it was packed full of stuff. And it was just him, and he was sitting outside. And I was like, hey, man, you know, it's warm inside. Why don't you go inside? He's like, they won't let me. I was like, they won't. So I went into Arby's. And I'm not telling you this so you pat me on the back. I'm telling you that I knew right from wrong, and I knew what to do. So I went into Arby's, and I ordered some food and a cup of coffee. And I sat it down on the table. I said, you just got some food inside. Go eat it. And if they say anything to you, here's the receipt. You tell them you've ordered it. It's yours. Go warm up. Right? Jesus said what? Whatsoever you've done to the least of these, you've also done unto me. in that moment, I knew what was right from wrong, and my character was shaped because I learned that from a Sunday school class, from a youth group. When we would get together, we learned right from wrong. So the things that we're doing, I had a volunteer in our youth group say to me one time, I wonder if I'm making a difference. Well, the truth is you are. You don't always realize that you're making a difference, but you are. And so they had been going over, like the first 8 books of the Bible or something. And so this teacher's telling me, like, I don't know if I'm even making a difference. And so she was like, all right, who knows the first 8 books of the Bible in order? And 3 kids were like, yep, I know it. And 3 kids knew it, right? Now, 3 out of 15 isn't a lot, but that's a pretty good start, right? So are you making a difference? Yes. Does it get tiresome? Do you get bothered with it? Absolutely. But if you stay the course, you'll find that those kids that were trained will not depart from the truth. They'll always know it. And so by the numbers, what we're building disciples, by the numbers, 44% of United States, it's on your sheet, 44% of United States teens say that they attend a religious service once per month. Once ain't gonna cut it, right? So as leaders, what are we doing to increase that number from once per month to twice, 3 times, or 4 per month? That's what we have to focus on. And so hopefully we're going to give you some practical tips to help you do that in your area. The next number that I have is 69% of teens attending church at the age of 17. That number dropped to 58% when they turned 18. And then that number turned to 40% at age 19. And you'll see that number is staggering when they get into their 20s, right? We do a really good job, as Pastor Paget said, of getting them saved, right? We do a really good job of, here's the Lord, you've met him, here you go. And then we put them to the fire, right? We don't do a good job, and I'm part of this group. We don't necessarily always do a good job of discipling those so that they want to stay. And that is where our youth departments, our kids ministries, our youth ministries, that's where those are important for this age. Because if we can get them involved and we can hang on to them at 17, 18, 19, if we can get them before that, the numbers that they'll stay are they go up. But if they get into their 20s and it's 1 in 3 say that they attend church regularly, we failed. We've dropped the ball. We're not making disciples. We're not doing that thing that we just learned about. We're not doing that at a consistent enough rate that this world will ever be changed. We don't have any world changers in our groups because we're allowing them to slip through the cracks, and we've let that be okay just for a long time. I heard the other day, I was listening to a podcast, and it said that Gen X was the most unchurched generation. And that might be true, but it all started with the millennials, right? And so that group they got away, but that started with the Gen Xers. Like we just kind of let stuff go and let stuff go and let stuff go. And then so the millennials didn't put an importance on it. And so now Gen X doesn't put an importance on it. So whatever we value is what we're going to teach our kids and what they'll teach their kids and generations. It just sort of happens. And so we can't just allow them to slip by and just get through the cracks. The thing that I've noticed and that I'm getting from our volunteer staff in our youth ministry is that kids don't have, especially when they get older, they don't have a basic Bible understanding. I can remember when I was in youth group, I used to want to find the passage before you. They just yell out John 3:16, you'd have to find it. Or 1 John 3:16, you'd have to find it. And it was a race, and you got a gold sticker on the wall, and then you probably got a candy bar. I don't remember what the prize was, but those things helped us to be able to find it. And so now when you say, listen, I want you to turn in your Bible to 2 Samuel, and then you can say it's the book between 1 Samuel and 1 Kings. They'll be able to find it. You can say that from, of course, that's another dad joke, but I like to use them sometimes. It breaks up the monotony. But here we are. being able to find it. And kids don't know. I was in a service the other day and just, not very many people are turning pages, and I like that. I like to hear turning pages. I didn't realize that I would, but I do. And trying to find where it was at, but couldn't find it. And that's okay, because at least he's trying. But I thought, man, I may have to flip pages because they're thin and they stick together, but I can remember those. And those are what gave us the biblical foundations that we still use today. I mean, you're able to just say, oh, I remember that. You may not remember the exact address, but you know what town it's in, right? I could tell you a scripture. I could say, oh, I remember that scripture. And you go, oh, yeah, it's Mark chapter 2. And you just turn there. And so we're finding that kids don't have that basic biblical understanding of where to find things or stories. So from the pulpit, I've preached before, and I would vaguely touch on, let's say, David and Goliath, and then I would just be like, you know the story, because who doesn't know the story of David and Goliath, right? It's common. And, you know, non-Christians use David and Goliath. You know, if you're in a locker room, they're talking about David and Goliath. But one time I got finished, and this young lady said to me, like, I wish you would have told the story, because I don't know the story. A new convert in mid-20s, I wish that I had known the story. And so now I feel like I have to preach longer, because I have to fill in the gaps that weren't filled in. And that's a neglect of our youth ministry, and that's why they're so vitally important. One last thing, and then I'm going to get to the practical tips. I was reading a Facebook post this morning from one of my friends that I was in youth group with, and so she was listening to a morning radio show, and they have trivia, and the topic was the Bible. And so the first person was asked the question, what's the first book of the Bible? And they couldn't answer it. And I thought, man, that's what is this world when you don't know that it's the beginning? Right? Genesis. Well, what world are we living in? And then subsequent questions they still couldn't answer. And as I'm reading her post, I thought, man, these are simple questions that anybody playing Bible trivia on a midweek service in the sanctuary would love to have, because I got that one right. You know, it's not like you're digging deep and who is Benai, you know, one of David's mighty men. You're not digging that deep, because that's not common knowledge. You know what I'm saying? But these simple questions they're not able to answer, and it's because we've allowed them to slip through the cracks in our youth ministries. And so really what I want to get to is the practical tips to help your youth ministry grow. These are things that worked for us, and if they don't work for you, that's fine. But you have to have a positive ground swelling, okay? And so what that means is if somebody has a positive experience or a positive interaction, they'll go tell 3 people. And those 3 people will be intrigued by the positive experience. But adversely, if their experience or interaction is negative, they'll tell 7 people, right? How many times do you open Facebook and you see something positive? It's mostly negative, right? Because everybody wants to broadcast, here's what happened to me, and I'm never going back, right? They want to broadcast that. But you have to have a positive ground swelling. So be aware of your surroundings and try to make every interaction positive. The first practical tip that I'll give to you is your volunteer team, okay? You can't begin to grow and invite kids and have them over if you don't have people to cover it, right? You have to have volunteers. You can't just have anybody volunteer, so you have to be picky about who you choose. And I'll leave that up to you and prayer time in how you choose those, but here's how I chose. I wanted people who were invested, right? I want people who are have some skin in the game, if you will. I want people who have kids in the program or have young kids that will be coming into the program. So then they want to pour into it, and they want to make it something that they can be proud of, that their kids are involved in. And so we choose based on that, but we also choose on character. You can have kids and not attend church, but you're not helping in my program. You can be good people, but if you're not active in our church, you're not helping in our program, right? I want you to be a part of what we're building as a church, and not just that you want to be here because that's where the kids are. I don't know you. You know, I'll be around my kids, the kids that I'm responsible for. Another thing that we just started doing was we got all our volunteers background checked, right? It's just a basic background check, but if people ask, I want to be able to say we're taking precautions and extra steps to make sure that these kids are protected because, number one, we love them, and number two, we want them to be safe, right? And so that's kind of what we've done. But our volunteers are so important because they make the thing work, right? The figurehead, sometimes the leader is the one that gets all the praise, or sometimes, you know, it's your fault when things don't go well, but you have to be willing to accept that. But without your volunteers, nothing really works, okay? So volunteer staff is important, and get more help than you need, right? You may only have 10 kids on a midweek service or on your youth night, so have 15 adults. Have more help than you need, because when you start to grow and you don't have help, then you've got to go find it, and now you're at a deficit help-wise, right? And you don't want to be there. I was there when I started. After COVID, we changed it. You know, we backed up. It was fourth down. We punted, and we regrouped, right? So, a little football reference for you. We had to regroup and reestablish what we had already tried to build, but we've seen it grow exponentially after COVID because we just started recruiting help. And it was, you know, you bring an idea to the table, I want you to bring an idea to the table. And so everybody has helped make it grow. The thing that you have to do with leaders, though, and your volunteers, is that you have to train them, right? You can't just say, hey, welcome to the youth ministry. Here it is, right? You have to train them. If you have a vision, you have to clearly express what that vision is. You can't just say, hey, we want to grow to 100 people, and you're going to help us. Thank you. That can't be it. You have to clearly express and help them understand what that vision is in order for them to help you grow, right? And so if you can express that, then they're going to buy in. When you get buy-in, that's when things happen. And so if they're successful, then your ministry is successful. The next group is student leaders. Brady mentioned this last night, and I thought, dude, he's already read this, ain't he? But you have to have student leaders. You know, people, like I said earlier, people aren't coming to youth group because I invite them. They're coming because their friends are like, dude, you got to come check this out. It's pretty awesome, right? They're coming to Tribe because, dude, you got to come check this out. It's awesome, right? They're having a good time. And so if you have student leaders, they do that. But when you have visitors come in, and sometimes, you know, kids are weird, like they'll trickle in and they'll just kind of be by themselves if they don't feel like they're part of the group. So when we have student leaders, we've got kids that will go because nobody's alone, right? Nobody sits alone. And it doesn't matter who it is or what age group, we've got leaders in their peer group that go and make them feel welcome, right? You know how it is when you go someplace. I've been to churches before, and the church service be great, but I didn't feel welcome. And I don't want to go back because I didn't feel like I was even welcome where they are. Not that the people were bad. You know, the Spirit of the Lord was moved, but I didn't feel like I was able to be a part of that because nobody shook my hand when I went in. And I'm not saying I'm looking for that, but it helps, right? If you want to grow, you know, one thing that I've always heard about the tabernacle is that people feel welcome when they come in. And that's because we've created that culture. And so when kids come in, we've created that culture so that when they come into youth group and maybe their parents walk them back, you know, when we do that, we engage the kid first, right? Engage the kid first, and then the kid feels welcome, and the parents are like, all right, they're going to take care of them, and the parents feel comfortable leaving them there, right? And then you can introduce yourself to mom, dad, grandparents, whoever brought them. And then everybody feels comfortable now. But then once we do that, if I meet a kid first, our student group knows, I better go say something, right? Because then Papa Bear's going to be on us. Kendall's the first one. I'm always like, you know, she's mine, but I make her do a lot of things. But other kids follow suit, and they'll join in. So even if they're not part of your student leader group, they become leaders just because they don't want to be left out, and so they're making people feel welcome, and so that group just grows, and it's healthy for your youth ministry when you have student leaders that will do that. I also use student leaders as a sounding board, right? So what worked when I was a teenager doesn't necessarily work today. They don't enjoy the same things. My sense of humor is different. Like, we don't enjoy the same things. Like I'd be like, hey, let's just gather around and watch TV. They don't want to do that. They want to be active. They want to do stuff. And so I use the students as a sounding board to kind of figure out where I need to be and what we need to do and where we need to go. Like, what's the temperature of the youth group? Like, is what we're doing, is it becoming stale? Is it becoming mundane? Are we just coming in and going through the motions? Or is this still keeping people's attention? Are we still active? I use them to find out about, I know a lot of things that I probably shouldn't, but when you gain the trust of kids, they'll tell you stuff, And so if a kid hasn't been in a couple of weeks, what's going on with that kid? Well, they were dating and now they broke up, so the one don't want to. You got to get over that, right? So I'm able to reach them and understand what they're going through without telling them somebody told me, And so we're able to do that. So measure the temperature of your youth group through the people in your youth group, right? I said yesterday, if you feel like you know it all, you don't really know anything, right? The kids will keep you up to date. You can use their lingo, but don't overuse it, because then they're just going to think you're dumb, right? But if you understand what they're doing and what they're talking about, then they'll appreciate it. And you can use it a little bit, and they'll think it's funny, and then you go on about your business. But then you've gathered them in. And so our student group keeps me up to date on what words mean, what words we should be using in church, and what words we shouldn't. Like, if I hear something crazy, I'm like, what's that mean? I'm not. Listen, I know I'm old, and I'm out of touch. I get it. Right? But I still feel like I'm pretty fun. And I'll let them have a little freedom. But if you use a word and I don't know what it means, I want to know what it means so that I can tell you not to use it if it's something inappropriate, right? Because they'll come up with these slang words for swear words or bad names, and they'll be calling each other this, and I'm like, dude, chill that out. But our student leader group keeps me informed, right? And that's the temperature of your youth group, and that will help you grow. And so I would encourage that one because that's important, all right? And that'll involve them in planning and give them ownership. When they have ownership of a program, then they feel like it's theirs and they want it to be better, all right? You feel that way when you've got an opportunity to do something as an adult at church. You've got ownership now in that program, and you feel like, man, I can really do something here, right? This practical tip is easy. I mean, you do that at all age groups, and they buy in. When they feel like they're a part of it, they'll buy in. But it's vitally important at the youth age because now they want to build it, right, and help grow it. And the third thing is you have to have a core group of leaders, adult leaders. So we mentioned our volunteer team, and our volunteer team is important. And it's everybody from, we cook on Wednesday nights in our midweek service, so it's everybody from cooking to serving to, we've got teachers, we've got people that just kind of monitor and help us, and then they'll go out to service when we release the kids to go to like their classrooms or small groups, if you will. They'll do that, and then, our teachers will go with them, but we've had people that monitor, and then they'll go back out to the sanctuary and join, we call it big church, and they'll go to big church, and so, but you have to have all kinds of people. But the core group of what you're at are those people that help you plan, that help you organize everything. One of my final thoughts is organization. And you have to be organized, but this is what that core group does for me, right? And so what I've got are, in my core group, Jesus had 12 that he went out and chose 12. And he said, listen, you're going to follow me, and I'm going to help you be fishers of men, and you're going to help me change the world, and you're going to be my disciples, and go forth, and you're going to make disciples, and they're going to make disciples. And that's how it was. But inside that group, he had an inner circle, right? A smaller core group. no one else come except for you and James and John. So it was Peter and James and John that were always there. They were the ones that were in the garden. They were the ones that were there for a lot of the miracles. They were part of things that not everybody was a part of. All right? So this is where we get together, and that core group helps establish what we're going to do next. You know, what event is it? That's what this is. Not everybody's involved in event planning, but you've got that core group. And when you pick your core group, don't pick people that are just going to agree with you, right? It's easy, and everybody as a leader wants a yes man. That's a great idea, Deej. We ought to go with that one. Oh, I love it. You don't need that. You can't grow if they agree with you, right? You have to have some disagreement. So one of my titles at church, and I don't really care about titles, and I do things that the Lord calls me into. So even before I had a title, I had this position without the title. But one of the things that we do at church is Pastor Scott will call me in the office and we'll have a conversation. And I'll tell him exactly how I feel about a certain situation. You know, what we're going through, what event we're planning. These are the good things, these are the bad things. And we don't always agree in private. I don't know if this will work. But when we leave that office and that door opens, I'm 100% on his side, right? 100%. It doesn't matter if I like the idea or not. I learned that when I was 16 years old. I went to work for a man named Jerry Sharp, and he ran a tight ship. And it was a grocery store, and I was bagging groceries. I was stocking shelves. I was cleaning the meat room, taking garbage, whatever it was. But one of the things that I learned from him is that you don't have to like it, but you have to do it. And so I learned as a young man, if I want to get paid, right, whatever the boss says goes. But that carried over now into adulthood. And so when we're planning things, it's not that I disagree 100%. I don't know that we've ever had a disagreement and I've walked out of there and been like, I can't believe he's going to do that even though I said no. Never had that. But we will bounce ideas off of one another, and that's what your core group has to be. Your core group has to be people that when you come up with this crazy, outlandish idea like, man, we're going to have the fifth quarter, and we're going to roll that into a lock-in, they have to be like, here's what's going to happen, right? Because I'm not the organized guy. I'm not the guy that's like, man, I've got everything in order. And if you're not an organized person, marry somebody who is. I did. If it's not in my wife's calendar, it's not happening, right? She writes it down for me. She keeps me going. But my core group is organized people, right? And they're all women. I will say this, they're all women, but their husbands are involved too, okay? Because they're organized and their husbands are the muscle. So it's my wife and then two of her friends, and then that's my core group because I can trust that they're not just going to tell me what I want to hear, they're going to tell me what needs to happen. And then so now when Kara says, Samuel, I need you to build this, Samuel just goes and builds it because he understands which side of the bread his butter's on. And Dusty just does whatever, he's along for the ride. That's why I love Dusty and Val as part of our core group, is because they're just along for the ride. Doesn't matter what it is, what kind of crazy idea it is. If the kids are going to be involved, they're there, and they want to be there. They're not necessarily yes men, right? But they're supporters, and that's what you need in your core group. And pick that core group based on personality, right? Jesus picked 12, and they all had distinct personalities, but even in the inner circle, they had distinct personalities that whatever your weaknesses are, they had strengths, right? And so they'll pick you up where you need picked up, but they'll also make you look really good when something works out in your favor, right? When it turns out good, they make you look smart, right? But I don't ever let them take the blame. If something doesn't work out, I never let them take the blame as a leader, right? That blame's mine, always. And I don't care to shoulder that because that's just the type of guy I am. The next practical tip is to split your age groups. And it's particularly important with high school and junior high or middle school, right? Because they're on different planes. They're not spiritually or mentally capable of grasping the same things. Even though that 8th grade, 9th grade group kind of it overlaps a little. because boys mature differently than girls, and their personalities are different. And they're still laughing at toilet humor, and girls have kind of moved on past that. But it helps to be able to split that group. Now, I say that in a classroom setting, so that your sermon content or your lesson content is age appropriate. But when you split those groups, you can bring them together for worship. We done a youth worship night. We advertised it as a youth worship night. We had, opened it up, grades 6 through 12. And I'm telling you, I don't know that I've ever been a part of a service, not at camp, that was as impactful as this one. Kids were, without adult I shouldn't say supervision, without adult leadership. It wasn't like, back in the day, they would smack your lips and, hold on and let go and all that stuff. No, there was none of that. So we had groups and you could watch it in waves, like just take over. Like the Spirit just came in and moved, and it happened in waves. And I didn't really preach that night. I exhorted a little bit about being chained up, right? And when those chains fall off, it's when Paul and Silas were in prison, they prayed and praised. And then those chains fell. But not only did they fall off of Paul and Silas, they fell off of everybody. And you could watch it just kind of fall. Nick started singing, and it was just, like a wave. But there was nobody telling them what to do. They were led by the Spirit. So you can bring them together, but educationally, they need to be divided. You're not teaching them at the same level. And so if you try to make your content at that age level, if you try to make your content to fit everybody, you're not going to reach anybody. Does that make sense? You can overlook a group, or you can pass over a group by making it too kiddish, or you can pass over by making it too adult. Okay? And I'm about to wrap this thing up here. We split our groups based on midweek on grade level. And so we start even pre-K. We'll do pre-K and kindergarten together, and my wife kind of takes care of that. She's the kids pastor and my organizer, and so she takes care of all of those. We do 1st through 3rd grade, and we do 3rd through 5th. So, because some of those 3rd graders are a little bit more mature, they can handle some of the older content, but if they're not, and it's kind of just based on however our volunteer feels like. If they're in a younger group, they can say, look, they need to move up because they're, I'm holding them back. Or if they're in an older group, we can say, look, you need to go back. But we always, that 3rd grade, it's the next level that you're able to do that. So we've got some 5th graders that will go with the 6th grade group, but we separate it that way. So 1st through 3rd, and then 3rd through 5th, and then we do 6, 7, 8, and then we do high school. We are currently in the infancy stages of a college-aged ministry. And so we've got some kids that are getting ready to graduate, but in keeping true to discipleship, I don't want to lose them, because they're not necessarily ready to go out to the sanctuary because they still want to wear shorts, and they just want to be kids still, but they're not ready for adulthood, but they're too old for my high school group. So we're working on a college age ministry. Help me pray about somebody to lead that, because I need somebody to lead it. I need a volunteer in that. And so back to content, make your content age appropriate. And if you need help with that, there's pre-printed, plug and play, pre-packaged curriculum that you can find. We use Pathway Press, but you guys can use whatever and there's a ton of free content on the internet that's available. And then make it fun, all right? It's got to be fun. Because if you just come in and it's just what the adults do, you're not going to win too many kids. But you can find a good balance, but make it fun. Man, it has to be fun. When I said I wasn't the organizer, I'm the fun guy. And it doesn't matter what age group. Like Pastor Ryan was saying, I 4-year-old, I worked on a chair one day, changing the oil on a chair in the sanctuary. Because a 4-year-old kid was like, here's some tools. And so we got down with wrenches and we changed the oil on a chair, Or it has to be that at all age groups. And sometimes we have inflatables. I'll get on the water slides with them. We had a picnic at the park, and I'm soaking wet, you know. It's what you do. You have to do. You have to make it fun. And when you make it fun, they'll buy in, and kids will want to be a part of that, and it'll grow just based on the fun. But when you get them there because it's fun, they find out that not only is it fun, but man, I've learned something. And I want to end with this story. Of course, be organized, because nobody wants to be part of something that's not organized. And goal setting. Let me touch on that real quick, and then I'll tell you the story to end it. Goal setting. You can't. Rome wasn't built in a day. We've all heard that, right? You can't go from 0 to 150, right? It's not just going to happen. But set small, attainable goals, right? So we've run 60, and I told somebody the other day, one of my volunteers, I told him the other day, like before Thanksgiving, I want to get to 85. I'm going to get to 85. But what's more than that is a sub goal. I want to see our 9th through 12th grade group go up to 30. I mean, that's what I want to see. I want to see it grow to 30 by Thanksgiving. Can we do it? Sure. Is it going to be hard? Absolutely. But we're going to do it, right? Because I feel like we've got the core group there to make it happen. And so set small attainable goals. And along the way, so what we'll do is we'll say, all right, we want to grow 3 this week. And if we can keep those 3, then in 2 weeks, we want to grow 3 more. And then, 3 becomes 6, 6 becomes 12, power of exponents, right? And so that's what we want to do. And so small attainable goals will help you achieve the greater goal. And as part of making this work, there's a girl that I went to school with. We graduated together. Her son is in 4th grade, and this is the impact of your youth ministry. She said he was reading his Bible the other night, and when he got done, one of his buddies has Christian comics. And so he was like, hey, I want to read that, a Bible like that. Will you get me that? But what struck me is that here these 2 kids are having, how did he know that he had that Bible that was a comic book, right? Because they're talking about it, not at church, right? And so the temperature of your youth ministry will be when those kids come to church and they can have fun, but they're learning, and then they can take it to their friends who aren't part of your youth ministry and grow it that way. So when they're having conversations about church outside of church, then your youth ministry is successful. It doesn't matter if your number's 100 or if it's 60 or if it's 30, right? Be healthy. Be healthy, and then you'll be successful. I thank you again for your time. Thank you for allowing me. I thank Pastor Carl and the Northtown Church for hosting us today, and obviously I want to thank Pastor Ryan and all the work you do. Appreciate you, brother.
Appreciate you. Love you, man. Hey, man, I am a product of the Central Ohio District. I'm a product of an effective youth ministry. Poor Pastor Joe, he was my youth pastor, my Sunday school teacher for a few years, and I tormented that.